Luke chapter 16, starting at verse 1. He, Jesus, also said to the disciples, "There was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was wasting his possessions. And he called him and said to him, 'What is this that I hear about you? Turn in the account of your management, for you can no longer be manager.' And the manager said to himself, 'What shall I do, since my master is taking the management away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do, so that when I am removed from management, people may receive me into their houses.' So, summoning his master's debtors one by one, he said to the first, 'How much do you owe my master?' He said, 100 measures of oil.' He said to him, 'Take your bill and sit down quickly and write 50. Then he said to another, 'And how much do you owe?' He said, 100 measures of wheat.' He said to him, 'Take your bill and write 80. The master commended the dishonest manager for his shrewdness. For the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of unrighteous wealth, so that when it fails they may receive you into the eternal dwellings. One who is faithful in a very little is also faithful in much, and one who is dishonest in a very little is also dishonest in much. If then you have not been faithful in the unrighteous wealth, who will entrust to you the true riches? And if you have not been faithful in that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own? No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money."
Well, there's no way that you could accuse Jesus of telling boring stories. You find that all the way through the Gospels. Whenever Jesus tells a story, they're intriguing, and you certainly can't tell the end unless you've heard it before. You can't tell how it's going to end. And this story, I think, is a very good example of that. It's a story about a crook. A company owner hires a man to be his manager or a steward, and after some time he realises that the man is ripping him off in some way, and so he fires him. I don't know whether you've been fired before. It might be a bit of a hard story to read if you have. Maybe you haven't. I think it's probably a little bit like being dumped by a girl, of which I've had some experience. Not lots, I don't want to give the game away too much, but I believe that there is a short, sharp conversation, so I'm told. And here is the short, sharp conversation. "And he called him," verse 2, "and said to him, 'What is this I hear about you? Turn in the account of your management, for you can no longer be manager.'" And I think often what would happen today is you're probably given a box and you put your personal belongings in the box and you're sent away. But this man is given a bit of time. He has time to turn the books in, and he intends to make good use of that time. So what's he going to do? I imagine he went home that night and crawled into bed, and I imagine he couldn't sleep as he tossed and turned, the worry of his future in his mind. He couldn't begin again. Easy living had made him soft and flabby. The thought of going to some of the men in the club and asking for a position, the thought of telling them that he'd been fired and begging for a job was something he's pride couldn't stand, and perhaps sometime in the middle of the night a plan struck him, and the next day he put it into operation. He made some phone calls. He says, "I've decided what to do so that when I am removed from management, people will receive me into their houses. Perhaps receive him in regards to managing their firms, or look after him and give him bed and food as a sense of obligation." But anyway, he makes some phone calls. The first man that comes in is an oil dealer. This man has contracted to deliver 1,000 litres of oil at a certain price. And the manager says, "Look, you've been a great supplier over the years. Why don't we just change the contract? Instead of 1,000 litres of oil for the price, why don't we make it 500? And the oil contractor can't quite believe his ears and is delighted and can't sign the deal quick enough. And as he's leaving, he says to the manager, "You know, you've done me a real service today. And I hope that at some stage in the future I'll get an opportunity to pay you back. Thank you." Later on that day, the manager has lunch with a wheat speculator. The man's contracted to deliver a certain amount of wheat at a certain price. And when they get to dessert, the manager says to him, "You know, I've been thinking about the deal that we've made with you, and I think we've driven too hard a bargain. Why don't we change the contract? Instead of 1,000 bushels of wheat for the price, why don't we make it 800? And that way I think that you'll come out ahead." And the two men agree. And as they leave the restaurant, the wheat speculator turns to him and says, "You've been a good friend today, you know. I certainly appreciate what you've done. And I hope that somehow I'll be able to return the favour in the future." Now you might say, "Well, this sounds like a bit of a strange story. How could a manager do this sort of thing?" You know, interestingly, this sort of thing happened from time to time in the ancient world. But here's something interesting. Now, I don't know whether it's true of this story, but it shows you that he might be a little more clever than we just give him credit for. Jews weren't allowed under God's law to charge interest to other Jews. And so what would you do if you were a businessman? How would you get around that? Well, what you would do is that you would pay for 800 bushels, but you would receive 1,000. Everyone did it. It was just the way that you didn't charge interest, but you got interest. And you weren't meant to do it, but everyone's doing it, so you did it. And if that's correct, then a number of people say, well, what this man is doing is reducing the bill by the interest in each case. And so what can the owner do? I mean, if he says anything, then he's really saying, well, I'm charging interest. And so he's in a bind. Now, it may not be that. This may be something else that's happening. But the man is shrewd. And of course, when the owner of the business finds out what the manager has done, he's not nearly as excited as the men who received the reduction. If the man had stolen from him in some way, he could have had him arrested. But he didn't steal the money. He simply made very good use of his possession, of his position and his possessions. He'd made some good friends. And so at the end of the day, the owner took the whole thing a bit philosophically, and he said, well, you know, at the end of the day, you've got to hand it to this guy. He's a shrewd one. When the chips were down, he knew how to make the best of a bad situation. And what else can you do? I did hear the story of a wealthy man in London who had his car stolen, and 2 days later it was returned, clean and with a full tank of fuel, and a note that said, we're sorry for stealing your car. We have seen the error of our ways, and by way of saying sorry, here are 2 tickets for the Cats musical on Saturday evening. And so the wealthy man thought, well, that's nice, and he took his wife to the Cats musical on Saturday evening. When they got home, their house had been burgled. Now, I'm not advocating stealing, but that's a pretty clever way to get people out of their house, don't you think? You've got to hand it to the guys. That was pretty shrewd. Well, the owner of the business was the same. You've got to hand it to the guy. That was pretty shrewd. He knew what he wanted to do. He knew what had to happen. And when the chips were down, he certainly made good use of his position and the money that he had in his hand. And there was someone else who had a good word for the manager, and that was the Lord Jesus Christ. And I think that comes as a surprise to a lot of people. Now, let's be clear. I don't think Jesus is commending the man's morals, but he is commending his prudence, his shrewdness. It says the manager commended his dishonest manager for his shrewdness. For the sons of this world, unbelievers, are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light, the disciples of Jesus. And I tell you, make friends for yourself by means of unrighteous wealth, so that when it fails, they may receive you into eternal habitations. The sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light. You're a son of light, which you are. An interesting way of saying it, isn't it? Child of light, a son of light. And as far as I can tell, this is the only time in the New Testament that phrase is used. And you've got to think about what it means, I think. Turn it over in your mind a little bit. It seems to me that a son of light, someone who walks in the light, a person who doesn't stumble because they see things as they really are. They see the world now and they see the world to come. They see the reality and the truth. They're not blinded by darkness. Francis Chan has a helpful illustration at this point, if you don't mind me using a prop. Just imagine that this rope goes on forever. It pretty much does, I can assure you. And this rope is the timeline of your existence. You come into existence at a point in time, but God has made you to continue your existence forever. You will move on into eternity. God is eternal both ways, but you're not. You're just eternal one way because he sustains you forever. And this red bit of your timeline into eternity, this red bit is your time here on earth. And it's just a few short years, isn't it, in comparison? And it's interesting because you can become so consumed with this little bit here. And you can live in this little bit here and say, well, if I just save and scrimp and get a good job and put money in the bank and get some shares and sell the car, and then when I get to this point in life, then I can really live it up. And then I'll be happy. And it's as if we've forgotten, like, the eternity that comes afterwards. We can be so consumed by the little bit. And I think he's saying the sons of this world are consumed by this bit, while the sons of light know about all the other bits. And you know, of course, what you do in this little red bit determines what happens for the rest. And if you know Jesus in this red bit, you'll belong to him and the rest. And if you despise him in this red bit, then there will be punishment. And not just for a short time, but forever and ever. It's really significant. And that's why I think the people that you know will think that you're crazy by the way in which you live and the way in which you treat people and the way in which you use your money and the way in which you come to church and the way in which you use your time and your resources and your possessions in this red bed. They'll think you're crazy. But you'll know that they're crazy because they don't walk in the light and they don't see all of this that's to come. I think that's what it means to, well, at least part of what it means to walk in the light. The Son of the light. You see it all. And here's the thing, the point that Jesus is making. Because when it comes to money and possessions and stuff, make friends for yourself. Win them for Christ so that when our wealth fails, they'll receive you into eternal dwellings. Use this time here and the wealth that you have to win people for here. Bunnings, that illustration was brought to you by Bunnings. Just as the dishonest manager makes friends that would help him when he was fired, Jesus says, make friends for eternity. Let me tell you something that you may not have thought about. One day, soon, some of you folk will go to heaven, go to be with Jesus. And you will be met by people from the Konate, from the eastern highlands of Papua New Guinea. And they will say to you on that day, do you realise we are here because you used your money and you sent the gospel to us? Your money didn't last, but we do. Others here, on the day in which you die, you will meet men and women who will say, now I became a Christian because I heard the gospel from a teacher at Carinya, from a student at Carinya. And you were one of the people that helped support the start of that school and helped support it as it grew. Because of that, the gospel came to me. Your money didn't last, but we do. Others here on the day in which you enter heaven will be met by people from the Philippines who will say, because of the way in which you spent your money, the way in which you supported workers, the way in which you sent teachers, meant that the gospel came to me. And I came to Christ. Your money didn't last, but we do. Others here will be welcomed by folk who say, you used your car and you ran me around and you ran me to church. You used your home to have me in, to speak to me. You took me to a men's breakfast. You talked to me at Summerfest. You followed me up after my life fell apart. You opened a door for the gospel, and I'm here because you spent your money and your possessions and your time and your stuff and your life. Those things didn't last, but we do. That's what Jesus is saying here, isn't he? Jesus, who's supreme over all, but the great majority of people in Tamworth don't know that, and they do not give him the honour that's due to him, and they'll perish forever. So much is at stake. It's not a small thing. It's not insignificant. Live on the razor's edge in life and death and eternity. And can you remember? How many here can remember the day in which we made the decision to act shrewdly and boldly as we invested money in this building? And I know there are people sitting here today You can say, because of that investment, I came along and I heard the gospel and I met Christ, and I will meet you in heaven and I will be your friend. Your money didn't last, but we do. Okay, how are you feeling at the moment? It's a bit strange talking this way. I think it's a bit strange. Yeah, my preacher's allowed to speak this way. It's a bit unspiritual, isn't it, to talk this way? Shouldn't we be talking more about the glory of Jesus in eternity rather than friends meeting us at the gate? Isn't it Jesus who saves people, not my money or my possessions? Isn't it a little bit unspiritual to talk that way? Well, can I say Jesus started it? None of this is to deny those things. Why do you make friends for heaven? Because you love Jesus. He's so precious, and you want as many people as you can get to bow the knee before him. Don't think you can spend your money in a way that brings the gospel to people. Isn't that crazy? You can use your money to bring people into the kingdom. That's astounding, isn't it? It's not spiritual, not according to Jesus. Because I tell you, make friends for yourself by means of unrighteous wealth, so that when it fails, they may receive you into the eternal dwellings. It's really quite clear, I think. He wants us to use stuff. He wants you to use money. He wants you to use your possessions for spiritual ends. And in fact, he says the way in which you handle your money and all the rest of the stuff that you have that has been entrusted to you, the way in which you do that will be a test to see whether you're trusted with things that are far more significant than money. He says in verse 11, if you're not being faithful in the unrighteous wealth, who will entrust you with true riches? You can't be trusted with the little things. What about the big things? So I think it's wrong to say we should only be concerned with spiritual things and not questions about shrewdness, or how we are going to spend our money, or how we're going to use the resources that we have, and how to be strategic, how to think ahead and say, as Tamworth gets bigger, what do we do? How are we going to invest our money? How are we going to use our stuff to win people to Christ? Jesus is very down to earth in this parable. He's saying, I've given you all that you have, now use it wisely, use it shrewdly for my glory. Now, I read this week in an old sermon about a man who came to Christ in his 20s, and over a year or so he became absolutely enthralled with Jesus, and he decided to sell his house and give the money to the church he belonged to, which was doing all sorts of good things for the gospel. And he had a good income, he knew that, and he thought, well, I can rent a flat, that's not a big deal. And when he told his plan to his Bible study group, something really, really quite tragic happened. They talked him out of it. Friends, it was only money. It was going to pass away anyway. It could have reaped the most wonderful blessing, and they talked him out of it. We believe so many myths about money. Oh, it'll make us happy. Oh, it's the be-all and end-all. It consumes us. It fills our horizon. Like the one that says, if you give your money away, it's gone. Not according to Jesus. Give your money away shrewdly. You're just sending it on ahead. And you'll meet it in heaven in the form of believers. In his book, Desiring God, Piper says, the issue is not how much a person makes. Big industry and big salaries are a fact of our time, and they are a necessary evil. The evil is in being deceived into thinking that a $100,000 salary must be accompanied by a $100,000 lifestyle. God has given us to be the conduits of his grace. The danger is thinking the conduit needs to be lined with gold. It doesn't. Copper will do. You can have God and you can have money. You just can't serve them both. No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You just can't serve God and money. You can have it both, you just can't serve them both. And friends, I hope you've seen over the last 4 weeks that money is a wonderful gift from the Lord, enjoyment of good things, and for giving away, and for being strategic with. Boldly, bravely, in a way that looks really crazy to the world watching. And I hope over the last 4 weeks you've realised how easily money can fill our horizon and stop us from seeing the really big things. Money isn't the big thing. Christ is the big thing. But money has a way of filling your horizon. I heard the story about a man who was working in a timber yard, and he was walking out one day pushing a wheelbarrow with a small box in the wheelbarrow. And as he got to the gate, the guard said to him, "What's in the box?" And he said, "It's just the chippings from the sawmill." And he said, "Show me." So I opened the box, and lo and behold, it just was full of the chips from the sawmill. And he said, "Okay, but I don't trust you. I'm keeping my eye on you." And the next day, the guy's walking out pushing the wheelbarrow with a small box in it. He said, "Show me what's in the box." It's just the chips from the sawmill. And so I opened the box, and in the box was the chips from the sawmill. And he said, "I'm watching you, buddy. You're doing something sneaky." This happened all week. Wheelbarrow with a small box full of chips from the sawmill. Eventually the guard said, "Okay, I don't know what you're doing. You're stealing from us somehow, but I'll tell you what, I'll do you a deal. You tell me what you're doing, we'll go halves, and I'll not tell anyone." He said, "Okay, you're right, I am stealing. I'm stealing wheelbarrows." It's easy to miss the big things sometimes, isn't it? Money will make you do that. It's a wonderful gift, sure is. For enjoying good things, sure. For giving away, absolutely. For being crazily bold, so you can win people for eternity, too right. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, so fill our eyes with the Lord Jesus Christ that we can't help ourselves but be generous and be slightly crazy with the way in which we use the stuff that you've given us. And so delight us every time we see people come into the kingdom and bow before the King. And what a privilege it is to be able to use the things that you give us, whether it be money or time or stuff, resources, to be a part of that in some way. And what a delight to be able to, as it were, walk into heaven and meet people who have been, as it were, bought with our money. Oh Lord, fill us with such a passion for Christ that would be a genuine delight. We pray in Jesus' precious name. Amen.